So here's the deal. Most dads today feel stuck, overwhelmed, like a shadow of the man they once were in their primes. And that's not okay. We're taking back the dad flag and creating a movement of men who will be strong. Strong leaders for their family, strong physically for their health, strong mentally for their careers, and strong internally for a balanced life. We are Dadstrong, and this podcast is for you. Hey, thanks for being on another episode of Be Dadstrong. And this is David, the host of the Be Dadstrong podcast. I had just not a super long podcast planned for today, and maybe it'll go as long as it's going to go, depending on how quickly I can deliver the point that I really want to deliver here, which is kind of complex. The topic for today's podcast is having a dad-strong marriage, and being a good dad. It's kind of like half of it is with the kids, maybe a little more than half. And if you're not married or you're divorced or something, this might resonate with you even more than the guys who are married. My hope is that you guys all are, and still with the mother of your children. And I think we can all agree that that's the best possible way, is to stick with the mom of your kids, right? It's the simplest overall. It's not always the easiest though, relationally. I can't really speak to the divorce side of things. I can't speak to the separation side of things, but I have a feeling we've been a lot closer than we even realize. My wife and I have been married for 11 years now. And in that 11 years, it feels like it's been 40 years, honestly. She would kill me if she knew I was talking about this stuff, but oh my goodness, we've just been through hell and back. In the very beginning, when we first got married, I was working a job, doing really well. And in the Bay Area, I was doing door-to-door sales for a company called C Beyond. It was like the boiler room. If you guys haven't seen Boiler Room, it's where people are just slamming the phones and making calls and hard closing people. And it's like the ultimate pump you up sales movie out there for the kind of sales that we were in. And so I was doing well with that. And I remember getting my first paycheck. And that paycheck had a whole bunch of commissions baked into it. And I had just done super well, hit all these bonuses in my first few months of work. And it was my first commission check. And I remember getting that check, and it was like, this is life. This is going to be life from here on out. There is no going back. It's just going forward. I'm only going to make more. Essentially, this is my baseline, right? This is my very baseline pay. And we started spending money. We got this like really nice apartment. We got a new car at that time. I started getting new furniture and eating out all the time. Like we just wanted to live this high end life, and it was the most money I'd ever made in my life. At that point, I think the most I had made in a year, because I was just coming out of college. I don't know, it was maybe like $7,000 for the whole year or something, maybe less. And then I got my first $8,000 check that had commissions in it. And it changed my whole perception, right? So we start living this life of luxury, and I mean, not like extreme, right? We still had just a 1-bedroom apartment, and we didn't buy some super fancy car. It was a Honda Accord, but it was new, and we pushed to pay it off in the first year. And within that first year, though, I was doing well in the job, and then I ended up quitting the job. And I just thought, you know what, I'm meant for different things. And what it really boiled down to is I was burned out on my job, right? If you've ever been in sales, door-to-door sales, where you're knocking on 50 doors a day and you're dealing with rejection like that, and the honeymoon phase wears off in the job, and you start questioning some of the practices, and can you really deliver on the product that you're promising, and all that stuff. It starts to wear on you. And I just essentially, I got bored and I kind of spiritualized it, like God's calling me out of this and I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to be a street minister and I'm going to preach the gospel and pray for the sick. And that's what I'm meant to do. It's the more holy thing, and it requires more faith. So it has to be right, because it's going to be impossible and difficult. So God has to support me, right? So I quit my job. We have no savings. Our monthly overhead's probably like $4,000 a month or something at that point, maybe less, but still no savings. And we're just like, we're going to live on faith and do this thing. And this is where we're going. And my poor wife, I mean, she comes from a pretty affluent background. So having this husband who is as pretty much manic, I guess, as it can be, from making a ton to making nothing in a matter of a few days. She was like, okay, well, I don't like this, but if you feel like God's telling you to do this. And that was like the hugest, I don't know if hugest is a word, but it's like the biggest mistake that I could have made at that time, was to, in a lot of ways, it wasn't my intent, but what had happened was I was manipulating her with spiritual terms. And if any of you guys are listening to this and you've been in the church for a while, or you've been in anything else, and you know the right language to use to get your wife to say yes, like, you know where I'm coming from. And so I used that language, and she thought, wow, he must hear God more than I do, because I don't feel like this is right. But I'm going to trust him and follow him. I mean, we were married like 10 months at that point, maybe less. And we went off the deep end, and eventually her parents had to bail us out a little bit, and we had to go live with them. Talk about humbling and embarrassing and humiliating. Making all this money, being, number 2 in the company, to living with my wife's parents. And then I had to go back to that job, the one that I quit. I went back and started at the bottom and had to work my way back up and go through training again, do everything again, did the same thing. Oh my gosh, it was it was brutal, and ended up being number 1 in the company for a while, and then got recruited out to another company and kind of went on a journey from there. But there was another, oh man, what that did with our marriage, I guess, reflecting on that, it brought so much distrust, and it kind of broke her. Like, because she came from a background that was just consistent, financially consistent. I mean, they weren't like mansion rich or anything like that, but her dad provided a really good life for them. And to go to the inconsistency that I was bringing was super hard, especially when everything had failed. And it was like, I can't trust you. I can't trust that you're going to lead our family right. And so from that point, I felt like I was constantly having to make up for lost time. I was having to make up for what I had done. And that, I don't know, it just kind of fractured us. And I don't know, it probably took 3 years or so to get back on track. And I'm just thankful at that time we did not have kids. That would have been really difficult for like trust to be broken in that way, and then try to raise kids at the same time. Because, when you're raising kids, it's like all hands on deck. Everybody has to pitch in, and you have to be on the same page. And if you're not, then resentment and bitterness and all that stuff really creeps in deeper. And you're not able to be your best to raise those kids. So going back to our journey, I don't know, maybe 2 years later, went to work for a company and was making 6 figures. And I thought I had made it. I wasn't door knocking anymore. I was just in this cushy sales director job, and I was loving it. And then that company laid off 80% of the workforce. They weren't managing money well. And we went from making a ton of money to nothing again. And at that time I knew somebody who wanted to grow her business, and she recruited me in to be a business partner with her. And I didn't really know all the details. I didn't even know what questions to ask. I just felt like, wow, I feel super special and important to be asked to be a partner in this company. And even though I really didn't have the qualifications, and that was a struggle. I was getting paid a little bit of a stipend. The company was just struggling, and I had no idea what to do. So within like, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, that ended. We drained all the money that we had saved up trying to make that company work. And I decided it was the perfect time to start my own company. So again, in the inconsistencies financially for my wife, she is like dying. She is just, this is not in her DNA to live like this. And if there's anyone who's out there listening who's like an entrepreneur, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It takes a special kind of wife, a special kind of woman to stand and be encouraging no matter what, and have a good day when you're having a bad day, and do her best to not have a bad day when you're having a bad day. Because I don't know, maybe as entrepreneurs, we can be a little bit like a squirrel, just super distracted all the time, and running all over the place, trying to make something happen. But when things aren't happening, there's a chart out there that shows the emotional journey of an entrepreneur. And it's like this up and down, high frequency wave chart. And it's so accurate. One moment, a client is telling you yes, and you're about to sign this huge contract, and everything is like, okay, honey, we can go out and buy groceries today because we're going to get this big contract. And then the next day, something happened that was out of your control, and it doesn't happen. And it's like, honey, we got to file bankruptcy, or we got to sell the car to pay for this month's food, or whatever it is. It's just this constant up and down. And in my wife's DNA, she wasn't made for that. Like in her mind, it's like, this is not how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to not even have to think about going to buy groceries. And like a very real story, I was at the end of my chain, trying to start my own business in the Silicon Valley. We had like no income, lost our only client. Like it was ugly. And I had so much debt. It was the kind of debt that like keeps you up at night. But I was trying my best to shield, and I thought protecting my wife from the truth was protecting her. And that's just should be like the most twisted thing that you could say. I was trying to protect my wife from the truth. Because if you really believe that you're one, like when you come into that covenant of marriage, that you guys are one person, and you're best friends, like your friendship is super important and your trust is sacred, then you shouldn't, no matter how ugly the truth is, you shouldn't have to protect her from it. So anyways, I was literally laying awake at night, so stressed out with how much debt we had. Every card was within like, I think we had like 2 credit cards at that time, which I look back and laugh on now. But we had like 2 credit cards. They were maxed out, like within $50 of being maxed out, and making the minimum payment was just like this shell game of how do we pay one card off with another to open up room on the other card and have enough money for bills and for the minimum credit card payment, and maybe for groceries. And there was a day that I will never forget. I was at home and we were living in my wife's grandparents' rental house for like nothing. It was like $500 a month. They were really wanting to help us out. And this thing could have gone for like probably $2,800 a month, maybe $3,000 a month at the time. So we were really getting hooked up. It was a sweet deal. But it's still, we just had no cash flow. So she goes to the grocery store and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know I hope she doesn't use the Chase card, or I hope she doesn't use the Amex card. And I'm just I just did not even want to tell her to be worried about that, because I knew she would lay into me, and I knew the truth would be exposed, and I'd have to deal with the situation for what it was. So I just let her go. She went to the grocery store, and then I got the phone call that I did not want to get. Oh, and by the way, she was 7 months pregnant at this time. So there's a fun little plot twist. She's 7 months pregnant at this time. And again, I just am thinking, if I protect her from the truth, she's not going to have a stressful pregnancy. It's for the better. So anyway, she gets to the grocery store. She gets to the checkout line with a cart full of groceries, and her card declines. And her next card declines. And she calls me, freaking out. What is going on? Why aren't the cards working? And I knew we had a little bit of cash in our debit card account, so I told her to use that. And she's the kind of amazing person that just won't let it go, right? It's not like, okay, honey, we'll talk about it later. It was like, nope, we're talking about it right now. What the F is going on? And I don't know if she used that language. Maybe she did, because she was pregnant. You just never know what a pregnant lady's going to say. But she was just losing it and sobbing. And I was losing it. I was so frustrated. And it was almost a relief to be outed at that point that we were in financial ruin. And I hated that feeling that, again, I had broken her trust. So think about to the beginning of our conversation here. I'm talking about marriage and how you really, really, really need to have a strong bond with your spouse. It's not just like, oh, we're partners and we're going to see how it goes. And like, no, it's so much deeper. It's so much more sacred than that. And the trust that you have with your spouse, like the things that you do. I was just reading a quote from a book as Dov Baron wrote. He said, essentially, like, what you do in your life echoes in the life of your kids. And that's a really tough realization for me. I don't want my kids to think that hiding things and hiding the truth to protect their spouse, hiding the truth to protect somebody is okay. I don't want them to believe that. And there was such a long time where I lived with this heavy guilt that I crushed my wife's spirit. You know, she had so much, I think back, she had so much hope and light in her eyes when we first got married, right? We look back at our wedding photos and wedding albums, and I see that hope. I see that light. And then when we went through financial ruin, probably 2 or 3 times, and we never filed bankruptcy, it just like we just dug this deep hole and we worked our way out of it. But there was this emotional breaking. You know what I'm talking about? This emotional disconnect, this drawback, where now it's like when your body's stressed out and you get knots in your back, it's like all this fascia just surrounds this stressed out ball of muscle, and it just protects itself. And that's exactly what happens in our marriage. It happened in our marriage for a long time. She's just a little bit more emotionally withdrawn and a little bit more withdrawn. And as a husband, I have a choice to pursue that or just say, well, that's on you. You make your own decisions. And man, I couldn't stand to do that. I have a really hard time with conflict. So I just don't like there to be tension in a marriage and in our relationship at all. So I pursued that. And a lot of it was saying, I'm sorry, over and over and over and over again. And not just like with words, but just let me prove it. and I took a job around that time and we moved across the country, and I thought it was going to be the best thing ever. And it was in some ways, but we had our first child away from family, and just, there was just so much going on. And it took us like 3 years to dig out of the debt we were in at that time. And a lot, and just a ton of hard work. But we did it, right? And now we're back in this situation in life where I had run some e-com businesses, as you guys know, and we just had to file bankruptcy. It's actually been about a week now since the actual court filing and dealing with that. But there's more trust now in our marriage, and there's more just this like strength, right? Without resistance, you can't get stronger. And I'm not saying go force situations to happen where you guys have to get stronger from them. Like that, life's just going to produce that. Life's always going to produce a storm, and your marriage is going to be one of your best assets. I promise you. When you get through this difficult time, because I know a lot of you guys are probably in a very difficult time in your marriage. It's just par for the course. Like it just happens. No fault of anybody's necessarily. For me, it was definitely my fault. It was naivete. It was youthful zeal. I don't know what you call it, or stupidity. You can call it stupidity in a lot of ways, or ego. But I created a lot of hard situations in our life. And the moment you can take responsibility for that is like the first step towards healing that marriage, right? Your spouse is going to see that and respect that. So I hope, this is not a super long podcast today, and I really, really hope that this resonates with somebody, because I know there's some really hard times going on out there with marriages. You're not alone. It's not that you guys are the ones who screwed up and everybody else has this perfect marriage, because I think that's a part of the trap that we all live in our society. And I don't mean to do this broad stroke generalization, but I think it's so true. Like what we see in our media and social media today is just everybody has these wonderful marriages, and if you don't, then you're an idiot and you screwed up. No. A part of marriage is conflict. You're two people who come from different backgrounds a lot of the time, and coming together to try to live together and create a life together and raise kids together and get completely on the same page is like, it's impossible to do that without conflict. I mean, love is like, if we walk in love, that's the thing that bridges the gap for us and helps us make that stronger bond in marriage. But it's not going to be easy. Love is difficult because it requires us to die to ourselves, Well, I mean, more on that at a later time, but it's, if we didn't really understand what love was, and that love doesn't give up, it doesn't fail, then we would not be married today. I will say that. That's how extreme the conflict has been from decisions I've made, and it's just so important to see the bond with your wife, especially as you have kids, and most of you listening to this have kids. It is so vitally important to fight for your spouse, to fight for your wife. Not fight with her, but to fight for her. And don't fall into this trap that, well, I have to stand my ground and I have to be my own man and don't let her walk all over me. That's not the perspective of what true love is. The perspective of love is, how can I lay myself down so that I can encourage and support her, so that she can have a firm foundation to live on. And I'm not saying she should live from your identity. Like that's not it, because that's a trap as well. But sometimes you have to take the lower road so that you're so that your spouse can trust you again. And I'm super curious to know your guys' thoughts on this and to hear your guys' journey. So I don't know, find me on social media on Instagram or on Facebook at Dadstrong. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and continue the conversation. That's all I got for today. My son's got his first day of baseball today, so I am off to go do that. But I'll leave you with this. I'm not an expert. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm just somebody who really cares, and I want to be a better dad. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So God bless you guys. Hope you guys have an awesome, awesome day, and we'll chat soon. Thanks for listening to this podcast. I am so grateful you got to hear what we just went through. And if you love what you just heard, come join us over at dadstrong.com and grab yourself some swag, grab a hat, a shirt, sport the brand that is helping dads be strong for their families, changing the world one household at a time. Thanks again for listening, and hope to see you over at dadstrong.com.